the Chinese believe Pakistan should survive, full stop. Okay? So while they're willing to do everything to ensure Pakistan's survival, they're not willing to put too much money into Pakistan's prosperity.
You're watching The Gist on Stat News Global. I'm Ramananda Sengupta. Our very, very special guest today is Dr. Amit Gupta, Senior Advisor to the Forum of Federations in Ottawa. And we're going to be talking about Trump, Modi, and Xi. Thank you so much for joining us. It's a delight to have you with us as always.
Thank you, Ramanand. And today I dressed formally. I put a jacket on for you.
That's okay. I think, why I mentioned Trump, Xi, Modi together is that right now these are the three leaders who seem to be sort of, making the news everywhere. But if you could start with just Trump, and given the kind of, democratic research that seems to be happening with the recent elections, is there a chance that Trump might tone himself down a little bit, or do you think he'll go the other way?
I don't think he'll tone himself down. I think he'll selectively go the other way. On certain issues, it'll be more strident. On certain issues, probably less. So I think that's what's going to happen. And he only has 3 years left. So why would he tone it down? What's the point?
So, what you're saying is that he is not yet a lame duck, but
No.
that'd be like after midterms. But the funny thing that's been happening as far as India is concerned is that for a while he's been saying that, I helped mediate a ceasefire between India and Pakistan, and without me they would have. But strangely enough, he keeps talking about the number of jets that have gone down, and it went from 5 to today it was 8. So, but he doesn't mention the country. He just says, 7 jets were down, 8 jets were down. Is there a reason he's not naming a country, or, is there something else going on?
No, I just think it's something that it's a stream of consciousness. So one day it's 5 jets, one day it's 7 jets, one day it's 8 jets. As for not naming the country, there may be, the trade deal is coming up. But on the trade deal, what I've heard is the real sticking point is India needs to publicly declare that it won't buy Russian oil.
Okay.
Yeah. And I've heard this from a couple of people.
So it's not even the agriculture axis?
No, it's not even the agricultural axis. That I suspect they've worked out something.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, one of the reasons why Trump seems to be upset is that India has not accepted the fact that he apparently mediated. While it's possible that he may have called up and spoken to them saying what's going on, Pakistan, on the other hand, seems quite happy, saying that yes, of course, without him, wouldn't have happened. There's a lot of talk going on about how Trump and some of the companies that he's associated with are getting into Pakistan because they want access to critical minerals, they want access to crypto, or some kind of a thing. Do you think Trump is actually doing that as an individual and not bothered about what happens to the country?
No, I suspect this is a lot of chatter. And I'll tell you why. It's not that easy to go into Pakistan, start mining, doing all these things, especially given some of the areas that this stuff is located in is not what you would call peaceful and stable.
Chinese haven't been able to do it yet. And so
Right. And good luck, Trump and Western mining companies. So I suspect that's being overplayed. I think it's like everything else. He likes to hype things, make them sound like he's got a great deal, and so on. And as far as the Pakistanis are concerned, nobody was talking to them. 2025 has been a great year. You think about it, the Saudi-Pakistan Defense Pact, Trump is now their bosom buddy, and the Pakistanis have this great expression. They say, we have always benefited from the generosity of strangers. The nuclear program, you can go down the list on it, the war on terror, that way. So this is yet again the generosity of a stranger. And they're willing to play along. And whatever they actually believe is a different story. And what they say to India is a third story.
Of course. That's a totally different story.
Right.
But it's interesting, if you could just stay on the Pakistan for a second more. Um, Pakistan has been it's already seen as almost like a vassal state of China. Now with the Americans getting into the act and trying to build, thing, don't you think there would be some conflict of interest between the two countries? You think China will take it quietly?
See, I think the Chinese are very smart in the sense they understand and accept that there will be a US-Pakistan relationship. They know there will be a China-Pakistan relationship, and they think both can go on without harming each other. That is the way to look at it. Then Pakistan's nuclear program comes from China. It doesn't come from the United States. Yes, the Americans still sell weapons to Pakistan, but increasingly their weaponry is going to be Chinese. Between the J-10 and the JF-17 and the missiles and the air defense systems, this is all coming from there. Now the other part is the BRI coming through Pakistan. The Americans have nothing to match there in terms of investments. So it's still very much a Pakistan-China relationship, but along the way, if you can make friends with the Americans, why not? And the Chinese are very pragmatic in that way. They don't sit there and say, me or you. They're like, yeah, you want to talk to the Americans, well and good. You want to talk to the Russians, well and good. So I think they've got some degree of pragmatism in this relationship. And I'll just say one thing quickly. My own sense is the Chinese believe Pakistan should survive, full stop. Okay? So while they're willing to do everything to ensure Pakistan's survival, they're not willing to put too much money into Pakistan's prosperity, which is a different thing. And what I mean is, you remember when Pakistan had to go to the IMF, they came to the Chinese, and the Chinese issued a statement which said, we wish our Pakistani friends success in their endeavors, which is a polite way of saying not interested. So I think there are limits to this. They've done what they can to make Pakistan survive, but they don't mind a Pakistan which talks to the Americans, talks to other people, and so on.
Now let's come to the part where I think most of our viewers would be very interested. That is the India-US relationship. And I recall, I think last night when we were talking, you said something about, I really like that phrase, that India is behaving like a jilted lover. I mean, that's I think,
Yeah.
approximate. Why are you saying that?
Look, let's go back to the analogy. We all know guys who were dumped by their girlfriend. And what do? They start dating other women, in this case, Russia and China. But you've always got one eye out on the old girlfriend in the hope that she's going to ask you back. And anything she does, you try to interpret it way beyond the significance. So Trump wishes Modi happy birthday, and everybody's ecstatic in New Delhi until he goes and says, well, you can't buy Russian oil, and so on. And you're like, how did this happen? And that is what the dumped boyfriend doesn't understand. That, I'm sorry, this is over, this is done, it can't continue the way it does. But you keep looking for these little slivers of hope. And I don't think you should. I think you should be very pragmatic about what you can do with the Americans. And I'll just say one thing. Again, to go with the analogy of the boyfriend, everybody's jumping around with joy on this 10-year defense agreement. Let's break down what's not in the agreement. One, the Americans nowhere have said in the future, if there is an Indian war with somebody, we will not impose military sanctions or economic sanctions on India. They did that in 65, they did that in 71. After the nuclear tests of 98, they shut down all the cooperation on the Tejas program, which is why Tejas got delayed. And go ask anybody in Washington to give you that guarantee. They'll say, we don't do that. Second thing, again, is in terms of arms production, we're very gung-ho, we're going to get all this here. The Americans will tell, I've asked this of people, of arms trade experts in America, can you guarantee the Indians that a spare part made in India will not be put on a Pakistani F-16 or a Pakistani C-130? And their answer is, we don't do that. No, we've never done that. So, and there are people in this town who tell me, we don't care who it goes to. I said, but the Indian people are patriotic, they do care. And whoever's the prime minister then, when this story were to come out, he would have to resign from office. Third thing is they won't allow you, despite all this bonhomie, to put nuclear weapons on their systems. So if you were to buy a US fighter jet, you can't rewire it to have nuclear weapons. If you were to buy the Tomahawk missile, if they gave it to you, you couldn't make it dual purpose, put that on. And you know, the last part in this is you're not going to get the technologies of transfer you so hope for. And I'll give you one very simple example. Tomorrow, the Chinese are launching the aircraft carrier Fujian, and Xi Jinping will be there to inaugurate the launch. Fujian has an electromagnetic catapult on it. Okay? India has been asking the Americans for an electromagnetic catapult for about 5-6 years now. Easily. And that conversation has gone nowhere. Okay. The people will now, I'm sure, watching this say, oh no, great progress has been made. India has yet to be handed anything in terms of technology which the Americans consider precious and valuable. Compare that with Israel, NATO, Australia, which is getting the nuclear submarines. Ask yourself where you are in the list of priorities. So, I mean, these are the 4 things which I think are very important in this relationship. And that is why I just think India needs to think more realistically about it and not hold out hopes that, oh, I left one of my old shirts in her house, so she's going to call me and that means she's interested. No, she wants your smelly shirt out of her house. So that's where the analogy lies.
You know, the other thing that, I mean, of late that's been coming around is that, well, not late, there was a narrative that said that, you know, the US wanted to use India as a hedge against China. But India, being India, a big country, doesn't like being used by anybody. And so it doesn't actually allow itself to be used. But the narrative today is that, you know, Trump doesn't seem to care whether there's a thing or not. So could you just explain that?
See, I think this narrative was built up in this city on incorrect premises. The thing to remember is the Americans need help if they have to counter China in the South China Sea, the East China Sea, Taiwan. India could never get there. And by the time it got there, it would be all over, given the way these wars are. So it really never fit into American plans. I've talked to the Japanese about this. They say, yeah, Indians, nice people, but they're too far away. So how are we going to do any defense planning? That's one part of it. The other part of it is, when has Trump shown any affection for India, any support for India on the China issue or the Pakistan issue? When Galwan happened, he said, I'm happy to mediate, which means I'm taking a neutral position. When he came back to power in 2025, he says, I'm happy to mediate, again a neutral position. And then Sindoor happens. I don't think I've heard one word from Trump which suggests he's pro-Indian and anti-Pakistani. He's basically, I, through my genius, brought about a ceasefire. So the point is, if you want the Indians to be on your side, you have to show loyalty. Loyalty is a two-way street. Alliances are a two-way street. I'm not sure what India is getting out of that and why India thought it was going to get something out of it.
You know, again, it's interesting that you of course put it into a very easy to understand kind of a format, but India has for a long time been trying to, for want of a better word, you know, hedge its bets against various things that's been going on. China, on the other hand, is very, very confident about what it wants to do and what it wants to. Do you think a trade deal is likely to happen anytime soon? People here seem to be still very optimistic about it, but they're saying, oh, you know, we won't compromise. Do you think that's likely to happen?
I think a trade deal will happen, but again, let's take this away from Indian hype to Indian reality. Indian hype is Nirupama Rao writing in the Foreign Affairs journal. India is a 4.1 trillion economy and we are indispensable. That's not reality. Reality is you're concerned about losing H-1B jobs. You're concerned about what is really for the Americans a very small chunk of bilateral trade, given that they do $600 billion of trade with the Chinese and even more with Canada and Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the reality that I'm getting to here is I don't see why you would think that the Americans would be worried about India, want to do better for India and so on, because they have nothing to gain, honestly. You don't sell them anything that they can't buy elsewhere. Gemstones can come from Colombia, Thailand. Textiles can come and do come from Vietnam. And
Bangladesh, wherever.
Bangladesh, exactly. And H-1Bs, you don't need entry-level coders anymore. You've got AI. So that portion of it just doesn't appeal to the Americans. And this is where what you're saying about the trade deal comes in. I think they more or less ironed one out. But Trump has an ego. Trump wants to hear, I brought about a ceasefire. And now he's made Russian oil a sticking point.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it's a matter of his prestige. Even though he may turn around day after tomorrow and say, I have no problems with Putin selling oil abroad. We're not dealing with somebody with a high level of predictability here.
Mm-hmm.
And what I would say is what India needs to understand is learn from the people who've resisted Trump. Canada, Mexico, Brazil, South Africa, where Ramaphosa who took Netanyahu to the International Criminal Court and Court of Justice and got him declared a war criminal, which, believe me, does not make people in Washington happy. But all the countries I mentioned have essentially
You didn't
said,
mention China in this list.
okay, I'll get to China in a second. But all the countries I've mentioned have said, we're happy to resist Trump. And okay, bring it on. Brazil's already been hit with as big tariffs as India has. What did Brazil do? They went straight to the Chinese and said, how much soybeans do you want? And the American farmers are now crying.
Mm-hmm.
Though allegedly Trump has a deal with Xi Jinping for that. But I'll come to China. The difference between India and China is this. Xi Jinping from day one said, I'm not showing up for that inauguration, and I'm not cutting a deal unless I know it's a long-term deal. Mao Zedong and Richard Nixon had a deal which lasted 30 years. That is what the Chinese want, long-term predictability.
Mm-hmm.
What they worry about with Trump is on Monday he says it's a great deal. On Friday he says I've changed my mind. The Canadians and the Mexicans are furious about this because they signed a deal with him in his first term. He didn't like NAFTA. He said, oh, the new deal is a great deal. Now the great deal is a bad deal. And the Canadians and the Mexicans are saying, okay, how long would this one last? And I think we can all agree they're justified in having a degree of skepticism. So the Chinese are saying, you want us to deal? Give us a long-term deal. Do you badly underestimated us? And see, the Post, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal have all pitched into Trump's positioning on China. That China is in trouble, the economy is in bad shape. Well, in September, their exports went up 8.3%. How bad shape can it be? Right? They've diversified their trade where they have $980 billion of trade with ASEAN, and then they have another close to $800 billion with the EU.
Mm-hmm.
The US is number 3. So they don't know what to do. And the third reason he's so confident is China manufactures. And Indians need to learn this before dismissing China. They now have 6th generation fighters. India's still struggling with the Tejas, 4th generation. They make the most electric vehicles in the world. Their electric vehicles, the BYDs, are the best. And since both of us are car nuts, Xiaomi, which is a phone company, entered the electric vehicle business in 2021. It's made a car which was tested in Germany this year on that super fast racetrack. It logged the 3rd fastest time of all time. You know, the 3rd fastest speed
You're
of all time.
talking about the telecom company.
Yeah, I'm talking
Okay.
about Xiaomi, the phone. This is like Airtel making a they want to move into this area now. DJI is the largest drone manufacturer. And I can go down the list, but the other thing the Chinese have done, which has positioned them really well in the global economies, more highways than the United States, more high-speed rail than the whole world put together, and huge electricity generating capability. Why is the last one important? It allows you to run a lot of AI. And I mean, just to give you an idea, where I live in the United States, I'm being now charged a $5 surcharge on my electricity bill so that we can build another power plant to attract AI. So it's a 5-7 year process. Look at where the Chinese are today. So there is a confidence in what the Chinese say is our original goal was to catch up with the Americans. Now it is to exceed and see how far we go.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not scared of Trump hitting them with tariffs. They're not scared of chip denial, because look at how well they're doing. And cell phones, the Huawei Mate 70 is as good as an Apple now.
Mm-hmm.
So the problem for India is India doesn't manufacture. And don't tell me the iPhone, because you make the case of the iPhone, everything else comes from China. But in all these areas I've talked about, the Chinese are a generation to 2 generations ahead now.
Mm-hmm.
And they're also doing big work in robotics, not just sort of industrial robots, but they're making what, for the lack of a better term, is humanoid robots, which can walk and talk and function like human beings.
Mm-hmm.
So if you are there, you know that the Americans can't threaten you. And yeah, they can stop chips. But the point the Taiwanese said is, if you tell us not to sell chips to China, that's 50% of our market. So they have positioned themselves, and I haven't even talked about their weapons systems yet.
Right.
Okay, the PL-15, which was used against India, is a 10-year-old missile, or more than that actually. They now have the PL-17 and the PL-21. They are moving ahead by leaps and bounds. Robot tanks, underwater robot drones. This is not the China of even 10 years ago. All the money they invested in Made in China 2025, it's come home to roost. And it's a much more confident nation. It's a country which is now ready to tell the Americans, no, we won't be bullied. And we have cards to play.
Mm-hmm. Again, I mean, one of the things that India keeps saying is that China is a revisionist power, which is meant in a slightly negative way, obviously.
Sure.
I would assume that any power that is rising would want to be a bit revisionist
Sure.
to start with. But given that we already have an issue with the border and other, and we also compete for the same resources, do you see India and China, if not kissing and making up, but perhaps agreeing to disagree on certain things and moving on, like you had suggested the last time, and you caused quite a storm with that one?
Well, this is to the audience. I was right, because I said you can be enemies with China, but you can still trade. And I gave the example of Japan, which has serious territorial disputes with China. I said you don't have to forget your territorial disputes or your interests, but you can make money off your enemy. The Chinese-Japanese bilateral trade is $300 billion. That's not to be sneezed at. And here's the thing I think your audience needs to know. Go and look at last year's economic survey of India, which could only be passed at the behest of the Indian Prime Minister. It says very clearly, we welcome Chinese foreign direct investment. It also says we will do a China plus one strategy, which is, yeah, you're manufacturing China, but to hedge your bets, manufacture in India. That one is not going too well.
No.
You can get a lot of Chinese investment. So my take is this: do not give up your territorial claims and essentially sit in the meantime and increase trade with China. But I think India should do what Deng Xiaoping told the Chinese, which is bide your time, hide your capabilities, build your capabilities. and don't volunteer, which is more or less I'm putting a lot of different dung thoughts together. And he said, when the time is ripe, then you can be a global actor. And I think that's where India should be too. That bide your time, improve your capabilities.
Let's talk about the US and China. Do you see Trump and Xi kissing and making up?
See, the thing is, no American president can tell the American public that I am accepting multipolarity. You have to say unipolar, America is the world's leader. I mean, look at American international relations writing. It's all about America's leadership position in the world. It's not about how do we have a multiple world order, a multipolar world order. And that is difficult for him. But the other side of this is, and I've been saying this for some time now, that if India is acting like the man whose girlfriend dumped him, the United States is now become a man-eating tiger. And Indians know this because they've all read Jim Corbett. What did Jim Corbett tell his readers? The tiger becomes a man-eater when it's too old and too slow to hunt. So why is Trump lashing out this way, looking for investments, so on? It's not a man operating out of strength. It is somebody operating out of a degree of weakness. And some of the demands, he's been suckered, I think, by some people. The Japanese told him they would invest $550 billion in America. Their annual budget is $770 billion. So where's the money going to come from? Now, over 20 years, $550 billion is nothing. But the Americans want it within the Trump administration. And what Trump is saying is, give me the money and I'll decide how we disperse it. And the Japanese are rolling their eyes. Same thing for the South Koreans and everybody else who's agreed to invest. The terms and conditions for investing, the terms and conditions for selling things, people, I think, are going to start saying, yeah, we agreed with Trump, but we don't have to fulfill it. And remember, the Europeans will never militarize, despite whatever rubbish they may be telling the press and in Washington and so on. So I don't see, here's how I see it. I think in the future you have in America, which is going to be the world leader and the world beater in certain areas, AI, certain types of space technology. I mean, just look at SpaceX today or Dragon X and so on. There it's going to be a world beater. In other areas, it's not. And Ramanand, the one thing that your listeners or viewers need to realize is, what is a Trump supporter? And there has been data created on the 3 presidential elections Trump's been in. In the first one, Hillary Clinton only got 470 districts or counties in America. She got 3 million votes more than Trump. She had close to 69% of American GDP, which is total American wealth. Trump had 32%, whatever it was. Biden had over 70% of American GDP. Again, only about 510 or 512 counties. Trump had 29%. Kamala Harris has 68% of GDP. Trump had 32% of GDP. Now, why am I giving this data? Trump supporters feel the American economic dream has left them behind. But that's not all Trump supporters. There's a lot of very wealthy people who don't like the way America has gone. The fact that it's browning, they don't appreciate that. Now, why is all this important? Unless you raise the living standards, the health standards, and the feel-good factor in Trump country, the United States can't remain a world power. But how are you going to get 38% of GDP to 50% of GDP? It's very difficult to do. So this is the long-term America, an America which is world leader in some areas, falling behind in other areas. And what I suspect is more and more people are going to say, no, we're not going to put up with this. And the interesting one is, when do the Europeans flip? Because right now, Keir Starmer was behaving at Sharm el-Sheikh like
Yes.
he was the dancing monkey of Trump. The other one was Shehbaz Sharif. And you saw the general thing. Shehbaz, come up here, talk.
I
Then he
know.
sent him back, 'cause your monkey danced. Then he's called Starmer. Then he decides he doesn't want the monkey. So, no, go back.
Yeah.
And then he tells Maloney, you're beautiful. It's okay to call you beautiful. And I'm like, what are we watching here? Are we watching 21st century diplomacy, or are we watching a king with his lowly courtiers? And a lot of people in the world are not going to put up with this. And I'll end by saying this. China, Japan, and South Korea now have 30% more in terms of GDP than the 27 EU countries put together.
Okay.
Yeah. So all this rubbish about how Europe is going to transform things, no. The future is Asia. And the question for India is, it has to decide where it wants to be economically. It has to decide how it wants to chart its course militarily. And it has to decide where does it stand politically. Because remember, on the two great issues of the last 5 years, Ukraine and Gaza, India has courageously abstained. It's stayed out of both wars. On Gaza, I think India is going to find out that world opinion has firmly turned against Israel. On Ukraine, I think India took the right step, because by and large now people realize that what was done to the Russians was wrong. So I think that's how I would look at it.
So are you actually recommending that India disengage from the US in some ways?
No. What I'm saying is, there are 6 US-India relationships. And if you talk to the people in the corridors of power in India, they obsess over 2. One is the military-to-military relationship, which I think I've pointed out, good luck with it, given that they'll never give you the permission to put your nuclear weapons on their stuff, nor will they give you guarantees that sanctions won't be imposed. The government to government doesn't work well because there's so many differences between the two countries. But Indian diaspora and India works well. Indian students and US universities works well. Bangalore and Silicon Valley works well and will work better as H-1Bs get reduced, because that work can be outsourced to India. And the last one is, I think, going to be Hollywood and Bollywood. But that one is still at a nascent stage. It needs to be developed. So why not do the things which can make the US-India partnership a strong one, without getting into things like, let's buy these weapons, which won't come, which will come with terms and conditions, okay? Or the Americans coming and putting you on the spot on, well, why aren't you supporting Ukraine? Well, no, we're not. Okay. But on Silicon Valley and Bangalore, you can do a lot of collaborative work. And the sky is the limit. The other one is Indian pharmaceutical companies and the American healthcare system, by the way, which I didn't mention. You go into any American pharmacy now and see the amount of drugs that come from India. And it's no longer just aspirin and stuff like that. One of the high-end cholesterol medicines, which my doctor put me on, is from India. It's from, I forget which company it is. But I was very impressed when I saw that. I said, I'm so glad India is doing upper-end pharmaceutical work now, and not aspirin and metformin for diabetes and so on. So the future should be one where it's mutually beneficial, but not one where you obsess over things. And Indians need to stop worrying about optics. Did did Claudia Sheinbaum of Mexico care that she was not invited to the inauguration? No. Did Lula care in Brazil? No, he said, go to hell. Did Cyril Ramaphosa, the new hero of the downtrodden, care? No. Indians were like, well, is our prime minister going or not? And then when Jaishankar goes, everybody is ecstatic that he's in the front row. I'm like, yeah, he was in the front row, but then you got hit with the 50% tariffs. Then you got hit with the threats for oil. So what did that front row seat buy you? Probably more attention than you needed. Compare that with the Chinese. The Chinese said, look, we're not sending a delegate. And here's the thing, protocol-wise, when there's an inauguration, so like let's say the next Indian prime ministerial elections, our ambassador attends. But since Trump has asked, we're sending the foreign minister, who's number 7 in the cabinet. And I don't know who's number 7 in Narendra Bhai Modi's cabinet. I'm assuming it may be the tourism minister or the minister for irrigation or whatever. They think that way. They think differently. We think in terms of optics. We are like looking for every little shred of evidence which may suggest he loves us. And let me say this, Trump will go away, but Trump's successor, meaning the guy who he'll probably run as a successor, is not going to be J.D. Vance. There's universal contempt for J.D. Vance. It's going to be his son, Donald Jr. Yeah, this is like the transition from Don Corleone to Michael Corleone. And the interesting thing is, Don Jr. has, over the last 8 years, built a real fan following in MAGA. They really like him. So he's going to be the one. And the structural economic weakness of America, which is the very high level of economic deprivation, that's not going to change. So how can Trumpism go away when he appeals to people saying, I'm going to raise your economic standards? And I'm not sure how Joe Biden was a friend of India.
This is a conversation we could have continued for a long, long time, but we've run out of time.
Sure.
I do hope the people who attacked you for saying we should do business with China the last time are listening to this particular recording.
They'll be upset with somebody else.
And the second part is, of course, I hope the people who are responsible for policy in India at least get some idea of what you're trying to say and we can move in the right direction.
Thank you.
Thank you so very much. And as always, it's a delight to have you with us. And I look forward to having you again.
Absolutely. We know it'll happen. Thank you.
That is Dr. Amit Gupta from the Federation of Forums talking to us about, as I said earlier, Modi, Xi, Trump, and where this triangular thing is taking the world. I do hope you enjoyed this particular edition of The Gist, and I look forward to seeing you again. Till then, this is Ramananda Sengupta.